Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast. I am your host, Lydia, and today I am chatting with solo female traveler Aditi, who prioritizes slow, immersive travel off the tourist trail. Aditi's travel content focuses on South and Southeast Asia, and most recently the gorgeous Seychelles Island off of East Africa. So I'm very much looking forward to exploring Aditi's travel experiences today. So with that, welcome to the show, Aditi.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Lydia.
Thank you for being willing to hop on a call with a random stranger who contacted you on the internet. As I begin every interview, I really want to know what sparked your wanderlust.
Oh yeah. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what sparked it actually. As long as I remember, I've always wanted to travel to different places, see different places, meet new people. Yeah, I just don't remember time before that. I've always been the kind of person who books the ticket and tells everybody else that, all right, I'm going here. Either you guys are coming or it's just me going.
Have you always felt the confidence to travel by yourself then?
Not entirely. I remember the first time I did travel solo. Uh, I did want to travel alone because I just wanted to travel on my own terms. Just get up if I want to, don't get up if I don't want to, stay for the sunset if I want to, just do whatever I want. But at the same time, it was extremely scary the first time I did travel solo. And I remember I carried a pepper spray and I had the all of the emergency contacts on my phone. And I remember being really scared my first night in a new place, even though I was still within India. But yeah, it was pretty scary. And I was sort of going through that experience yesterday in my head compared to how I travel now, where I've just become a lot more casual with a lot of things. Just I book a ticket and then I leave. And the thought of being scared doesn't even cross my mind anymore, which is quite a difference. But yeah, I'm glad I've come all this way.
Yes, I love to see the growth. It's so funny, like our first experiences traveling solo is so much like, oh, gotta be prepared for everything, like based off like what we hear about like what could go wrong in theory, just like especially as females, like, oh, we gotta watch out for all of these things, but in reality, it's not usually that serious.
Yeah, in reality, it's really pretty chill actually.
Yeah, highly recommend for everyone. And I'm so glad that you and I are both like sharing our voices to promote solo travel because it's such a rewarding thing to do. You also describe yourself as a slow traveler. So, can you describe what this travel style means to you and why you prefer it?
Yeah, for me, slow travel means just going to a place without an actual itinerary. So I'd rather take a long time in a place, at least a couple of weeks, if possible, a couple of months, and sort of live the regular life, like go grocery shopping and do the kind of things as much as possible, do the things that the locals do, and yeah, do it like more like live in the place rather than visit the place and see the tourist attractions.
And would you say you recommend this style of travel to everyone or to anyone like who's able to do it?
Not really. It depends on the person. Some people do not enjoy just being in a place and they're more the kind of people who want to do something constantly. And I think it's not really for those people, but I am the kind of person who likes just being. Spending a whole day sitting in a cafe and reading a book is my perfect day. So for somebody who likes that kind of stuff, I think this is a good option.
Yeah, it definitely immensely helps to know who you are as a person when traveling. When did you exactly figure out that you preferred slow travel?
I think that was a long time ago because every time I would try to make a plan of traveling somewhere outside of India, I would always feel like a week or 2 weeks. just it's just not enough to go somewhere like Europe or a whole new country, right? Because that can, I mean, that just barely scratches the surface of a place, and you don't really understand the place at that pace. So, as far as I remember, I've always wanted to stay as long as possible in every place I go to.
No, that's so real. And what advice would you give to people who maybe don't have the luxury to take off so many vacation days to like slow travel in a place? Like, do you think it's possible?
For me, it was not initially possible because I did have a location dependent job where so I could only take a couple of weeks off. But at some point, I figured that this was really important to me, and not doing this doesn't make sense for me. Just being in one place forever doesn't make sense for me. So I quit my job and I found a remote job so that I will be able to earn as I'm living in different places.
Okay, so as a remote worker, that grants you the flexibility to kind of travel how long, however long you want, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Um, what are the pros and cons of remote working?
I mean, the obvious is you get to work from beautiful locations. Your day can look like you work, and then in the evening, you do something that most people can only dream of. Like, I don't know, it could be crazy things like go scuba diving or be wandering the deserts or be somewhere in the streets of Paris. Could be anything. The pros are, I think, pretty obvious, but the cons are you have to have a lot of discipline. Like you're in a new place and everything is new, and then you sort of need to figure out your routine in that new place where nothing is familiar, food is not familiar, the time zone is not familiar, people don't speak your language a lot of the times, and you want to go explore, but at the same time, you have to work. You do have to stick to your schedule and get your work done. So that there are a lot of challenges that people don't realize, but yeah, it is a balance.
Okay, and is there anything you wish you knew before trying this remote career? Like maybe tips to make it easier or just more manageable when you travel?
I think I've learned a lot of things while doing this, but it's also about just figuring out what works for you. So, for some people, living in their own accommodation works. For some people, living in a co living sort of place works better because you have the social aspect as well as a dedicated place to work. And a lot of times, when you're in a new place by yourself, if you're living by yourself, it can get a little lonely. So that's something you do need to figure out. And I think it's most of just you learn as you go and you understand yourself more and what you need. And a lot of things that you've not thought of before might suddenly become something you need to think about and figure out. Yeah, it's a process, but everybody has their own ways of dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it all comes down to, like we said, knowing yourself. And that takes time, of course. It's a lifelong journey to kind of get to know what works, what doesn't. And then
Yeah.
exactly like how have you done slow travel through the countries you've been to? I know you've traveled extensively through South and Southeast Asia, so which countries would you say you've spent the longest in?
So while I was looking for my remote job, there were a few places that were always in my head. So one of them was Goa in India, and another was Bali. So I've spent a lot of time in Goa because it's just that much more accessible to me, and a couple of months last year in Bali because that's how much the visa would allow, and a couple of months right now in Thailand. And yeah, in my head, I'm always going on about the pros and cons of staying in each of these places.
Yeah, and like how do you decide how long to stay? Do you determine that beforehand or like once you get there you're like, okay, I only need this amount of time to stay here?
I do determine that beforehand, but for the most part, I have a rule that I'll give any place a couple of weeks at least, like one destination in Bali. So I was in Bali for 2 months, but I stayed 2 months, 2 weeks in Ubud, 2 weeks in Amid, and 2 weeks in Uluwatu. So I feel like 2 weeks is a good amount of time to sort of get into the space of slow traveling, where you don't feel pressured to do everything at once and you can sort of relax into it, take your time with things.
Mm, yeah, that makes total sense. And then, like, what would you say how much of an impact the destination itself has on how long you want to like stay there? Like, for example, is there some destinations where you think slow travel is easier or better, like more meaningful?
Yeah, I think right now I'm in Chiang Mai and I feel like Chiang Mai is one place that makes slow travel so much easier because it's a place full of nomads and there's something happening in this place every single day. Like every evening there is something to do. Every day there's something to do. So I think it's a place that's more geared towards people like me who are traveling and working at the same time and living in a new country. And yeah, at the same time, I feel like every place has its own pace, and someone might like some other place better.
Okay, so you think it just depends on the traveler rather than the destination?
Yeah, definitely depends on what you're looking for and where you feel more comfortable.
Okay. It's a good thing to keep in mind. And then one of your more recent trips, at least based off your Instagram, is traveling to the Seychelles Islands, which is like one of my dream bucket list places ever since like I saw what the beaches looked like. They look incredible. So, how was your trip there?
Yeah, Seychelles is definitely incredible, and not many people visit, so it's not as commercialized as the beaches in Thailand or Bali. You see a lot more secluded, and you actually get to experience the kind of untouched nature that we always crave to explore. At the same time, it's a very beautiful island. I mean, all three islands are extremely beautiful, and yeah, definitely a must visit for anybody who wants to go.
Did it remind you a lot of like the countries you've been to in Asia? Or did it have a very like distinct African feel due to its like geographical proximity to Africa and also being an African country?
Yeah, so it was my first time in Africa, and Seychelles, I would say, is not. It's a lot. It's very mixed. So people speak both English and French, and it feels like a more mixed community than just Africa. But again, I've not really been through Africa to know better. It feels like the countries that have been in Southeast Asia, but the difference is that Southeast Asia has a lot of nomads and there's a community, and that is not there in Seychelles so much.
Okay.
But yeah, it has its own charm, which is very different from here.
Okay. Would you say it's a pretty like accessible place to travel to despite its kind of underratedness, not like not unpopularity, but it's not super popular as we mentioned. Do you think that's due to how expensive it is or like what was your experience with the accessibility?
Yes, the Seychelles can get quite expensive. And yeah, that's probably one of the reasons that a lot of people don't go to Seychelles that much. At the same time, it's also um, not as convenient to travel within the Seychelles. Like in Southeast Asia, where we are very used to services like Grab or something just to go from one place to another. It's like an Uber, right? But that's not really the case in Seychelles. So you have to rely on the buses or the taxis, which can get quite expensive actually.
Okay. And what about the food? Is that also kind of a higher price thing or
Yeah, eating in the restaurants is quite pricey.
Okay.
So they do have takeaways, which are sort of these smaller places which have a buffet style of food available. So you can choose what it is that you want to eat, and they'll pack you a meal box, and that's a much more affordable option because the restaurants can absolutely be very expensive.
Okay.
At least coming from India. I mean, coming from Europe or something, it might not be that expensive. It might be probably the same amount that you would spend on a meal in Europe. But yeah, coming from India, that's somewhat expensive.
Right. So it's not a budget friendly destination.
No, definitely not a budget friendly destination.
Unfortunately, most islands are not, but it makes sense. Like it's an island, and you are paying for its beauty. Um,
Yeah.
how did you like the food? Like, how would you describe it?
I feel like Seychelles food is it's the Creole cuisine. It's a lot of meat and seafood, and it has its own distinct flavor. In some ways, I found some similarities to Indian food, which I crave sometimes. So they do have a dal sort of thing, a lentil soup sort of thing, which is quite similar to our cuisine. And yeah, a few of the things like the octopus curry or the grilled octopus, which are famous in Seychelles, they are really good. And mostly for the seafood, I think I like it more.
Okay, that makes sense considering it's you're like right there on the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay, and that leads me to my final like rapid fire questions. The first one being, what is your next dream destination?
So recently I met this girl at the place I'm staying at here, and she was telling me about the Lofoten Islands in Norway. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but they're basically islands where you can see the northern lights, and which to me seems like the most incredible thing you can experience. And the way she described it is definitely my bucket list destination at
Okay,
this point.
I haven't heard of those islands. How do you say them?
Lofoten, so Lofoten.
Huh. Okay, I'll have to check that place out on the map.
Yeah.
And then secondly, what is a memorable meal you've had when traveling?
Oh, there have been so many. There's just no end to the amount of memorable meals I've had while traveling. But uh, to name one, that's honestly very hard. But I think the one that I constantly go back to was in Krabi. So there is this famous dish called red snapper in chili lemon sauce and the masaman curry. And we had it at this small local restaurant, a family lunch shop. And yeah, in my head, I have gone back to that meal quite a lot, just trying to get that back, like find that again. So,
Mm,
yeah, I think mostly I'm a fan of Thai food. So for me, a lot of the best meals I've had have been in Thailand.
yes, I love Thai food as well. It's always so jacked up though, like obviously outside of Thailand, which is unfortunate because I know how cheap it is, like in the country itself,
Yeah.
though I have never been. And then lastly, what is a special place in your heart?
The most special place in my heart, uh, it's either Goa or Bali. Goa has been my home for the last couple of years, the place that I've always gone back to, and the place that I want to go to when I want comfort and just I want to stay in one place. It's always Goa for me. And Bali gave me a lot of great memories and just that feeling of um, I don't know, just finding something you've always been looking for, something like that. So yeah, both have a special place in my heart.
That's beautiful. Would you say both of those places have still maintained their character, their specialness, despite how touristy they've become?
Unfortunately, both of these places are quite um, being uh, being ruined by the development at this point, I feel like, but unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that, right? I do feel bad about that, but that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I think in recent years I've just heard more and more about these places, Goa and Bali, whereas before they were kind of more unknown. Well, I don't want to leave on a sad note. So my last question will be, where can we find you?
The best place to find me is Instagram. That's where I post most of my travels, and I've been posting a lot more lately. So my handle is the.teachybitch. So yeah, we can connect there.
Yes, I'll put that in the show notes. And once again, I want to thank you for your time today, filming all the way from Thailand. And it was really good chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Gotta Case Wanderlust podcast. Again, my name is Lydia, and you can find me on social media in the About section of this podcast. Please rate and review if you found value or insight from this, and I hope to see you in the next episode.